Marcus Washington stepped through the reinforced glass doors of Pine Ridge Juvenile Detention Center for the first time as a free man in 12 years. The familiar smell of industrial disinfectant and the echo of footsteps on polished concrete floors brought back memories he had spent years trying to forget. But today was different. Today he wasn't walking these halls as an inmate. He was here as a counselor, carrying a worn leather briefcase and wearing a name tag that read Marcus Washington Youth Counselor. The irony wasn't lost on him. 25 years ago, at 17, Marcus had been sentenced to 15 years for armed robbery and assault. He had walked through similar doors, angry and defiant, convinced the world owed him something. Now at 42, with graying temples and hands that had learned to build rather than destroy, he was returning to a place that represented everything he had once been, hoping to help others avoid the path he had taken. Director Sarah Chen met him at the security checkpoint, her expression professional but warm. She was younger than Marcus had expected, probably in her mid-30s, with kind eyes that seemed to see through the careful composure he maintained. "Mr. Washington," she said, extending her hand, "welcome to Pine Ridge. I have to admit, when I read your application, I was intrigued. It's not often we have someone with your unique perspective apply for a position here." Marcus shook her hand firmly, meeting her gaze. "I appreciate the opportunity, Director Chen. I know my background raises questions, but sometimes the best teachers are those who've walked the hardest roads." She studied him for a moment, then nodded. "That's exactly why I hired you. Come on, let me show you around." As they walked through the facility, Marcus observed everything with the trained eye of someone who had spent years in similar institutions. The boys they passed looked familiar, the same defensive postures, the same hard eyes trying to hide fear and vulnerability. Some were barely 14, others nearly 18, all of them carrying burdens that seemed too heavy for their young shoulders. "Most of our residents come from broken homes," Director Chen explained as they walked. "Poverty, abuse, neglect, the usual suspects. Many have never had a positive male role model in their lives. That's where we hope you'll make a difference." They stopped outside a common room where about 15 boys sat in a circle, their body language radiating reluctance and skepticism. A young counselor named David was trying to facilitate what appeared to be a group therapy session, but the boys seemed more interested in staring at the floor or making sarcastic comments than participating. "This is Group B," Director Chen said. "They're some of our more challenging residents. Previous counselors have struggled to connect with them." She paused, then looked at Marcus directly. "I'm hoping you might have better luck." Marcus watched the scene for several minutes, recognizing himself in the slouched shoulders and defensive glares. "When do I start?" 3 days later, Marcus found himself sitting in that same circle, facing the same group of skeptical faces. David had introduced him simply as Marcus, mentioning that he would be taking over their group sessions. The boys sized him up with the practiced assessment of those who had learned early that survival often depended on quickly determining who was friend or foe. "So," Marcus began, his voice calm and steady, "I'm supposed to be your new counselor. I know what you're thinking. Here's another do-gooder who's going to try to fix us with some psychology he learned from a textbook." A few of the boys smirked, recognizing the accuracy of his assessment. "The thing is, I don't have a psychology degree. I don't have fancy certificates on my wall or theories about what you need to hear." A boy named Terrell, 15 with arms crossed defensively across his chest, spoke up. "So what do you have?" Marcus looked directly at him. "I have this." He rolled up his sleeve, revealing a faded tattoo that spelled out East Side in crude letters across his forearm. Several boys sat up straighter, their casual disinterest replaced by genuine attention. "I got this when I was 16, thought it made me look tough. What it really did was mark me as property of a gang that didn't care if I lived or died." The room had gone completely silent. Marcus continued, his voice never losing its steady cadence. "I spent 15 years in prison for armed robbery. I was 17 when I went in, 32 when I came out. I missed my 20s, missed watching my little sister graduate high school, missed my mother's funeral because I was locked up for something I thought would make me rich and respected." A thin boy named Kevin, who couldn't have been more than 14, leaned forward slightly. "Why are you telling us this?" Because, Marcus said, meeting each of their eyes in turn, I see myself in every one of you. I see the anger, the hurt, the feeling that the world is against you, and the only way to survive is to be harder and meaner than everyone else. And I'm here to tell you that's a lie. The hardest thing in the world isn't being tough, it's being vulnerable enough to change. Over the following weeks, Marcus slowly began to chip away at the walls these boys had built around themselves. He didn't use traditional therapy techniques or motivational speeches. Instead, he told stories about the first time he saw a man killed in prison, about learning to read books in his cell because education was the only escape he had, about the day his sister visited him after 8 years, and he realized he had missed watching her grow from a child into a woman. Terrell was the first to crack. During their fourth session, he began crying while talking about his father, who had left when Terrell was 7 and never looked back. He said I wasn't worth staying for, Terrell said through tears he had been holding back for years. How you supposed to feel worth something when your own dad don't think you worth nothing? Marcus leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. Your father's failure to see your worth doesn't diminish your value, Terrell. It just means he was too broken himself to recognize what was right in front of him. Slowly, other boys began to open up. Kevin revealed that he had been living on the streets since he was 12, stealing to survive after his mother died of an overdose. James, 17 and built like a linebacker, admitted that he joined a gang because it was the only family he had ever known, even though he hated the violence it required. Each story was different, but Marcus recognized the common thread. They were all boys who had been failed by the adults who should have protected them, who had learned to survive in a world that seemed determined to destroy them. But progress wasn't linear, and Marcus learned that the hard way. During his second month at Pine Ridge, Terrell was involved in a fight that left another boy hospitalized. The incident happened during lunch, escalating from harsh words to thrown punches to Terrell grabbing a plastic knife from the serving line and slashing another resident across the face. Marcus found Terrell in solitary confinement, sitting on a bare mattress with his head in his hands. The boy looked up when Marcus entered, his eyes red with tears and rage. Don't say it, Terrell said before Marcus could speak. Don't tell me you're disappointed or that I let you down or any of that bullshit. I know what I am. I know what I'll always be. Marcus sat down on the small chair across from the bed, taking his time before responding. What happened, Terrell? He called my mama a junkie whore, Terrell said, his voice barely above a whisper. Said that's why she's dead. Said that's why I'm going to end up dead too. And I couldn't let him say that about her. Marcus nodded slowly. Your mother means a lot to you. She was everything, Terrell said, tears flowing freely now. She tried so hard, you know? She worked 2 jobs, tried to keep me in school, tried to keep me away from the streets. But she got hurt at work, started taking pills for the pain, and then he trailed off, unable to finish. And then the pills became more important than anything else, Marcus finished gently. Including you. Terrell looked up sharply, expecting judgment, but found only understanding in Marcus's eyes. How did you know? Because I've seen it before. My cellmate for 3 years, Danny. His story was just like yours. His mother was a good woman who got caught up in something she couldn't control. It didn't make her a bad person, Terrell. Addiction is a disease, not a moral failing. They sat in silence for several minutes before Marcus spoke again. But here's what I need you to understand. Your mother fought a battle she couldn't win, but she loved you. She would want you to fight the battles you can win. And right now, the biggest battle you're fighting is against becoming the person that anger wants you to be. What if I can't? Terrell asked. What if I'm too messed up to be anything else? Marcus leaned forward, his voice intense but kind. Then you keep trying anyway. You know how many times I failed before I got it right? How many times I made the wrong choice, hurt people, disappointed everyone who believed in me? But every single day I got another chance to choose differently. And so do you. The incident resulted in Terrell being transferred to a higher security facility, a decision that weighed heavily on Marcus. He felt like he had failed the boy, that his methods weren't enough to overcome the deep trauma and conditioning these kids had experienced. Director Chen found him in his office that evening, staring out the window at the parking lot. You can't save them all, Marcus, she said softly, settling into the chair across from his desk. I know that intellectually, Marcus replied without turning around, but knowing it and accepting it are two different things. That kid has so much potential, so much heart underneath all that anger, and now he's going to a place that's going to make him harder, more cynical. Maybe, Director Chen said, or maybe the seeds you planted will take root eventually. Change doesn't always happen on our timeline. Her words proved prophetic 6 months later when Marcus received a letter postmarked from the state penitentiary where Terrell had been transferred after turning 18. The letter was short but profound in its simplicity. Mr. Marcus, I've been thinking about what you said about choosing different every day. I'm trying. It's hard, but I'm trying. I started reading books like you told me. Thank you for seeing something in me even when I couldn't see it myself. Terrell. Meanwhile, Marcus continued working with the other boys in Group B, gradually building trust and helping them process trauma they had carried alone for too long. Kevin, the thin boy who had been living on the streets, showed particular promise. He was intelligent and articulate when he chose to be, with a natural empathy that made other boys gravitate toward him for advice and support. I've been thinking, Kevin said during one of their sessions, about what you said about using our experiences to help other people. Like, maybe all the bad stuff that happened to us don't have to be for nothing. Marcus smiled, recognizing the shift in thinking that represented a crucial turning point. What are you thinking, Kevin? I want to work with kids like us, Kevin said, his voice gaining confidence as he spoke. Kids who got nobody, who living on the streets. I know what that's like, what they need to hear. Maybe I could make a difference. I think you could, Marcus said sincerely, but it's going to take work. You'll need to finish your education, probably go to college, learn how to channel your experiences into helping others without letting them consume you. Kevin nodded eagerly. I'm ready to do the work. I'm tired of just surviving. I want to live. That conversation became a catalyst for change throughout Group B. Boys who had previously shown no interest in education began asking about GED programs and college preparation. James, the 17-year-old who had joined a gang for family, started talking about becoming a youth mentor in his neighborhood. Others began setting goals that seemed impossible just months earlier. Legitimate careers, healthy relationships, contributions to their communities. But Marcus's most significant challenge came in the form of a new arrival named Damon. At 16, Damon had already spent time in multiple facilities for increasingly violent offenses. He was intelligent and manipulative, with a charisma that could quickly turn groups of boys against staff members. Previous counselors had written him off as a lost cause, documenting their belief that he was a sociopath who would likely spend his adult life in and out of prison. When Director Chen assigned Damon to Marcus's group, she pulled him aside first. I need you to know what you're dealing with, she said, handing him a thick file. Damon Wells, charged with assault, arson, and terroristic threatening. He's been bounced between facilities since he was 12. Every counselor who's worked with him says the same thing. He's beyond help. Marcus flipped through the file, reading reports that painted a picture of a boy who seemed determined to prove that he was irredeemable. But buried in the psychological evaluations and incident reports, Marcus found something others had missed. A mention of severe abuse in Damon's early childhood. Trauma so extensive that it had required multiple surgeries and ongoing medical care. What happened to him before he was 12? Marcus asked. Director Chen's expression darkened. His stepfather, physical and sexual abuse that went on for years before it was discovered. Damon was hospitalized twice with injuries that were initially attributed to accidents. By the time the truth came out, the damage was done. Marcus closed the file, understanding now why Damon had built walls so high and strong that no one had been able to scale them. I'd like to work with him one-on-one first, before introducing him to the group. Marcus, Director Chen said carefully, I need you to understand that this boy has hurt people. Staff members have been injured trying to work with him. He's not like the others. He's exactly like the others, Marcus replied quietly. He's just had to armor himself more completely to survive. Marcus's first meeting with Damon took place in a secure conference room with guards stationed outside. The boy was smaller than Marcus had expected, maybe 5'6" and wiry, but he carried himself with the predatory alertness of someone who had learned to see threats everywhere. He had intelligent, dark eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of the room and everyone in it. "So you're the new savior," Damon said, his voice dripping with sarcasm as he settled into his chair. "Let me guess. You're going to tell me about how you turned your life around, and now I can too. How you found Jesus, or got clean, or discovered the power of positive thinking?" Marcus studied the boy for a moment before responding. "Actually, I was going to ask you about the scar on your left hand." Damon's composure slipped slightly, his eyes flickering down to the raised white line that ran across his knuckles. "What about it?" "Looks like it came from a blade, probably when you were younger. The way it healed suggests it wasn't treated properly when it happened." Marcus kept his voice conversational, clinical. "I have a similar one on my shoulder from when I was 13. My stepfather threw a broken bottle at me." The room went very still. Damon's eyes narrowed, searching Marcus's face for signs of manipulation or pity. "Why are you telling me that?" "Because I recognize the look in your eyes," Marcus said simply. "The look that says you're ready to hurt anyone who gets too close, because getting close means getting hurt. I wore that same look for years." "You don't know anything about me," Damon said, but his voice lacked the venom from moments before. "I know you were hospitalized twice before you were 8 years old," Marcus continued. "I know someone who should have protected you decided you were something to be used and broken instead. I know you learned early that the world is a dangerous place where weakness gets you destroyed." Damon was silent for a long moment, his hands clenched into fists on the table. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "So what if I did? What's that supposed to change?" "Nothing," Marcus said. "And everything. Nothing, because what happened to you was real and terrible, and it shaped who you had to become to survive. Everything, because surviving isn't the same as living, and you're worth more than just making it through each day." Over the following weeks, Marcus met with Damon twice a week, slowly building a foundation of trust that allowed the boy to begin processing trauma he had buried under layers of rage and violence. It was slow, painful work, with setbacks and breakthroughs that came without warning. During their 7th session, Damon broke down completely, sobbing as he described years of abuse that had convinced him he was worthless, disposable, destined for nothing but pain and destruction. "He told me I was nothing," Damon said through tears. "He said nobody would ever want me, that I was broken and evil and better off dead." Marcus felt his own eyes well up as he watched this damaged boy finally allow himself to feel the pain he had been carrying alone for so long. "He lied to you, Damon. About all of it. You're not evil, you're not worthless, and you're definitely not broken beyond repair." "How can you know that?" Damon asked desperately. "How can you sit there and tell me I'm worth something when everybody else sees a monster?" "Because I was a monster too," Marcus said quietly. "I hurt people, Damon. I robbed families, threatened children, put a gun in an old man's face and took his life savings because I thought my anger gave me the right. But being a monster isn't who you are. It's what trauma taught you to be to protect yourself." Progress with Damon was measured in small victories. A session where he made it through without threats or violence. A day when he helped another resident without expecting anything in return. Moments when his natural intelligence and insight shone through the defensive barriers he had constructed. The breakthrough came during Marcus's 10th month at Pine Ridge. Damon had been attending group sessions for several weeks, mostly silent but no longer disruptive. During one session focused on discussing future goals, Kevin was talking about his plans to work with homeless youth when Damon suddenly spoke up. "That's stupid," he said, his voice sharp. "You think you're going to save some kids just because somebody saved you? You think they're going to listen to you just because you've been where they've been?" The room tensed, expecting an argument, but Kevin surprised everyone by responding calmly. "Maybe not. But if I can help even one kid realize they're worth something, then it ain't stupid." Damon laughed bitterly. "Worth something? Man, we all in here because we ain't worth nothing to nobody. Our parents threw us away. Society threw us away. What makes you think some random kid's going to be different?" "Because," Kevin said, looking directly at Damon. Marcus didn't throw us away. He could have, probably should have, but he saw something in us that we couldn't see in ourselves. And now I can see it too. Damon was quiet for a moment, then looked at Marcus. What exactly did you see in us? Marcus chose his words carefully. I saw boys who had been hurt by people who should have loved and protected them. I saw intelligence and strength and resilience that had been twisted into anger and violence because that was the only way you knew how to survive. Most importantly, I saw potential that hadn't been destroyed, just buried. And what if you're wrong? Damon asked. What if we're exactly what everybody says we are? Then I'm wrong, Marcus said simply. But I'd rather believe in your potential and be wrong than write you off and miss the chance to witness who you could become. That conversation marked a turning point not just for Damon, but for the entire group. Boys who had been written off by multiple institutions began to see themselves differently, to believe that their stories didn't have to end in prison or early graves. They started supporting each other in ways that went far beyond the superficial camaraderie of shared circumstances, forming genuine bonds built on mutual respect and understanding. Marcus watched this transformation with a mixture of pride and humility, knowing that his role had been to plant seeds and provide water, but the growth had come from within each boy. They were teaching each other lessons about resilience and hope that no counselor could have provided. As his first year at Pine Ridge drew to a close, Marcus reflected on how much had changed, not just for the boys he worked with, but for himself. He had found purpose in his pain, meaning in his mistakes. The years he had lost to prison and addiction had become the foundation for helping others avoid the same traps. Director Chen called him into her office on a Friday afternoon in late spring. I wanted to talk to you about your performance review, she said, gesturing for him to sit down. The transformation we've seen in Group B has been remarkable. These boys have made more progress in the past year than most of our residents make in their entire stay here. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Praise had never come easily to him. They did the work. I just created space for them to do it. Don't minimize your impact, Director Chen said firmly. What you've accomplished here is extraordinary, which is why I wanted to discuss expanding your role. We're applying for a grant to create a residential program for youth aging out of the system, and we'd like you to help design and lead it. Before Marcus could respond, there was a knock on the door. Director Chen's assistant entered, followed by Kevin, who looked nervous but determined. Sorry to interrupt, Kevin said, but I wanted to ask Mr. Marcus something, and I thought you should hear it too, Director Chen. What's on your mind, Kevin? Marcus asked. Kevin took a deep breath. I've been accepted to community college for the fall. I'm going to study social work like we talked about. But I was wondering if you thought maybe I could come back here sometimes, maybe help with the younger kids who just arriving. I know what it's like to be scared and angry and not know who to trust. Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. This boy who had been living on the streets just over a year ago was now planning a future dedicated to helping others. I think that's an excellent idea, Kevin. These kids need to see someone who's walked their path and come out the other side. Director Chen nodded approvingly. We'll definitely find a way to make that work, Kevin. Your experience would be invaluable. After Kevin left, Marcus and Director Chen continued their conversation about the expanded program. As they talked, Marcus realized that his work at Pine Ridge had become more than a job. It was a calling, a way to transform his own pain into healing for others. Later that evening, Marcus sat in his small apartment, surrounded by letters from former residents who had moved on to transitional programs or been released back to their families. Terrell's latest letter reported that he had earned his GED and was working in the prison library, helping other inmates learn to read. James had been released and was working with a community organization to provide alternatives to gang involvement for at-risk youth. Even boys who had struggled and made mistakes were finding ways to rebuild their lives. But it was Damon's progress that filled Marcus with the most hope. The boy who had been written off as irredeemable was slowly learning to trust, to believe in his own worth, to imagine a future beyond survival. He still had difficult days, moments when the trauma threatened to overwhelm the healing, but he was no longer alone in his struggle. During their most recent session, Damon had asked Marcus a question that revealed how much he had grown. Do you think people can really change, or do we just learn to manage what we've always been? Marcus had considered the question carefully before answering. I think we're always becoming who we choose to be, moment by moment, choice by choice. The trauma shapes us, but it doesn't have to define us. Every day we get to decide whether we're going to be ruled by our pain or whether we're going to use it to become more compassionate, more understanding, more human. Damon had nodded thoughtfully. So what we've been through, all the bad stuff, it don't have to be for nothing. No, Marcus had said firmly. It doesn't have to be for nothing. It can be the foundation for helping others, for understanding pain in ways that people who haven't walked through fire can't. It can be what makes you uniquely qualified to reach kids that nobody else can reach. Now, sitting in his apartment with letters from boys who were rebuilding their lives scattered across his coffee table, Marcus understood that his own journey, the mistakes, the prison time, the years of struggle, had all led him to this moment. His pain had become his purpose. His failures had become his qualifications for helping others succeed. The next morning, Marcus arrived at Pine Ridge early, as had become his habit. He walked through the halls with a sense of purpose that had taken him 42 years to find. In a few hours, he would sit in a circle with boys who reminded him of who he used to be, and he would help them imagine who they could become. As he prepared for his first session of the day, Marcus thought about the ripple effects of redemption, how one person's transformation could inspire another's, how healing could spread from person to person like light pushing back darkness. He had come to Pine Ridge hoping to help troubled boys find their way, but in the process, he had discovered that saving others had completed his own salvation. The boys began filing in for their morning session, each carrying their own stories of pain and possibility. Marcus looked at their faces, some still hardened by trauma, others beginning to soften with hope, and felt grateful for the opportunity to witness their transformations. In that moment, he understood that this was what redemption looked like. Not a single moment of revelation, but a daily choice to turn pain into purpose, to use one's own healing to help others heal. It was the knowledge that no one was beyond saving, that everyone deserved a second chance, and that sometimes the people best qualified to offer hope were those who had once believed they were hopeless themselves. As the session began and the boys started sharing their struggles and victories, Marcus smiled quietly, knowing that every word they spoke, every step they took toward healing, was proof that transformation was possible for anyone willing to do the hard work of changing their story from the inside out.